Okay, so on to our list. If anybody else wants to read, I'll run through the list in the same order. First of all, Mark.
In view of the way the discussion has gone this evening, the work, and particularly the paintings, I've sidelined the things I intend to do for a second. I'm going to read this thing. It's called Climate Change is a Hoax. It's a commie conspiracy, and they're all in on it. Mountain glaciers and polar ice caps deliberately melting to prove their left-wing credentials. Seas deceiving us by rising, corals conning us by dying, deserts deluding us by spreading, floods bluffing us by becoming ever more frequent and devastating, species after species pulling our legs by inhabiting inappropriate ecosystems, going extinct or both, the atmosphere hoaxing us by changing and heating, land and sea, ice and desert, bird and insect, flower and crop, field and forest, cloud and sunshine, they're all in on it together, this global socialist plot. Every one of them a climate cultist, deluded and deluding, their voices in unison swelling to an impassioned rant. Time to expose it for the fakery that it is. Time to drill, baby, drill, to hack down our forests, to rack up our profits, to silence the prophets of doom. Time to ensure growth in a present that is, not some fantasy future imagined by all these geological, atmospheric, oceanographical, and biological hoaxers.
Hurrah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good, yeah.
Thank you, Mark. I'm muted now. What was that one called?
Rant.
Muted.
Climate change is a hoax.
Oh.
It's a quotation from someone.
Yeah.
Okay. Linda?
Okay, well, I read a new one in the first half, so I'll read an old one in the second half. My memory's not what it was, but I don't think I've read it here. But one or two of you may have heard me read it in New Mills in the past. It's called The Sluggard Waker. And the Sluggard Waker was a cane or rod of some kind used in churches and chapels, maybe end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century, to wake people up when they fell asleep during the sermon. So, the Sluggard Waker. My grandpa's hands were grained, as dark and knotted as a cottage door, but he could flay a stook of barley, cut a crook to hook a lamb, whip a strip to beat bad boys, or tease me silly with a twig. But mine, he said, were tiny, trim, made for needlework, not wood. I waited sorely for a reel of thread, labouring as a tweeny maid, harder than a lad. I carried coal and wood, I laid their fires, raked, swept, cleaned, blacked, polished every grate, wishing I'd never left my home. Then scullered, I salted, stretched and hammered, braised and boiled and simmered. Now they say sleep's a blessed ease from lives of honest toil and sorrow, but maids' beds are hard and narrow and hidden in the hottest hollow high up in the eaves. So one who slips full wearily from work to dream may stir just easily to lie awake half the long steaming summer night. Restless, I counted all the passing hours as careful shepherds count their sheep, but never counted stitches. No, nor collars starched, nor linen pressed. Their numbers surely came to more than I could name. But I did dream on Sundays, when God gave us leave to sit and pray. I dreamed winter. I dreamed warm loaves and fishes. Spring, a shepherd boy to please and sing songs sweet enough to please a king. Summer, I dreamed daisies, lilies, ripe strawberries, yellow cream. At harvest, a golden mound of barley, gifted to the gleaners by the sheaves. Aye, and a rosy laughing baby, wrapped in bulrushes and leaves. I dreamed Siloam's gentle rill carried me far from toil, until the sluggard waker struck my brow. I woke to hellfire warnings. He frowned as if I daydreamed sin, and nodded so as to let the devil in. I blushed, scalded by such ill will, that he should mouth me idle. Well, my grandpa carved himself a staff, finer than any parish handiwork, and my mother's lovely voice sang psalms more sweetly than this stone-throat choir. My father, may God rest his soul, had reading, and his scripture stories filled my heart long before any I would hear in this dark place. And if I had my father's words, I'd speak a sermon that would wake parson, churchwarden, parish all. I'd pin true colours to my breast and poke a burning shame in theirs. I'd him arrest, fox him with questions, rack him with alarm and guilt, till doubt and fear begged pardon. And if I had my grandpa's staff, I'd strike that sluggard waker, to my rod shed serpents, hissing the truth of all his secret sins. If this small hand would dare to make a fist, I'd knock some pity, honest virtue, sense into each cold, hard heart. Hot, red colour flags my skin, but I must bow my head and hold rage in. I humbly pray, I sweetly sing.
Very good.
Thank you, Linda. It's difficult to keep those emotions under wraps, isn't it, when you're doing you're reading it out.
It's funny reading something like that out when you're sitting comfy in your living room.
Okay, now next is Phil.
Yeah, I mentioned the poetry appreciation course that I've been following, and we've done various poetic forms. For instance, the ballad. The ballad we studied was The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes, and then we were asked to write one of our own. We've also done sonnets and elegy, war poetry, various things, but I've chosen a ballad that I've written relating to the allotment that I am quite keen, a keen allotment holder, and some of our stalwarts up there that keep the thing going, in particular a guy called Casey Jones, and this is called The Ballad of Casey Jones Locker. As you head out of town, you might miss it, for the entrance is locked and discreet. And though nothing there's vaguely illicit, it's where those in the know used to meet. In the shed on the left when you enter, if you're lucky and you know the code, there's a locker that's painted magenta, and within it the relics are stowed. Here they gathered, the faithful plot holders, all are steeped in the ancient folklore, and they clambered on each other's shoulders in their search to grow better and more. Now the relics I've mentioned don't wrinkle, and in fact there's no more than one. It's a photo with eyes all a twinkle. It's a shrine to the great Monty Don. And each Friday back home on the telly, they're attentive to his every word. He's the gardening equivalent of Pele, or whoever's your yardstick preferred. What to grow, when to plant and the soil type. Weekend jobs we should all bear in mind. Now there's COVID, so meetings are on Skype, and with lockdown we're strictly confined. So when Casey Jones opens his locker and old Monty beams out at the void, that's when Casey intones, "What a cocker," with his spirits immediately buoyed. To one side of Monty Don's picture, there's an ancient small packet of seeds. It's a Longmeadow magical mixture, guaranteed to banish all weeds. So the faithful would stretch out their palms, and they'd wheedle old Casey and wink. "I'll have one, maybe two, and no qualms. When we meet in the pub, you've a drink." Once they'd hold of their precious cargo, then they'd rush to get back to their plot and sow it before an embargo, from the sock to protect Japanese knot. Now the mingling and clamour have faded. All is changed. We don't meet anymore, and with weeds all our plots are invaded. What the heck can that virus be for? Okay.
Thank you, Phil.
For those who don't know, Monty Don's quite a famous garden.
Yes, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah.
And Dave, have you got something else that you want to read?
Sorry, this is another rant. It's aimed at those who are trying to take liberties with the lockdown rules. Dying from corona. My 4-year-old granddaughter blithely remarked that corona has ruined her 2020. On that count, we adults and children certainly think alike. Never could we imagine that we would be able to lock ourselves up for months at a time, and that too without any major social unrest or acrimony. However, as we approach the winter months, the worst seems to draw near. The combination of being locked up at home, shorter days bereft of sunlight, and the fear of a triple whammy in the form of COVID, flu, and norovirus looming large over the horizon. On the whole, this winter will be foreboding. We are desperate to get to the other side of the winter. The news of a successful vaccine has raised our hopes, and we just can't wait to lower our guard. But beware. Let me tell you that the worst time in any war is as you near the end. The retreating army almost invariably resorts to scorched earth practices. More Jews died in the last few weeks as the Nazis began to sense inevitable defeat. Things are no different for corona. With the second peak, although the number of deaths are not going up exponentially, indicating that the virus may have lost some of its initial virulence, those few cases that eventually land up in the ITU tell you a different story. It is that the individual outcomes are not necessarily determined by how prevalent the virus is, but by one's own immune system. And yet so little is known on this front. There is no way of telling whether it would be you, if afflicted, will land up with the worst outcome. With this pandemic, nothing can be more tragic than to contract this illness at this late stage when we are so close to the finishing line. It would be a travesty of fate to land up in ITU, die a painful death with nobody around you to bid you goodbye, and then have a virtual funeral with your friends and acquaintances watching the spectacle from the comfort of their own homes. The invisibility and the anonymity of being virtual takes away the compulsion to dress up for the occasion or to maintain solemnity. Nor there is any guarantee that some of these observers will not be munching sandwiches or sipping cups of coffee when you enter the chamber in your box. Your journey in this world will be over within a matter of minutes with no memory to roll. Even your last opportunity to spend your own money on your own funeral will be forfeited. I have therefore, for reasons outlined above, conditioned myself to grin and bear the horrors of isolation as the better of the two worst outcomes or options. The fear of such ungracious and pitiful death, ending in such an undramatic exit, has shaken me so much that I leave behind my end-of-life instruction in the event of such tragic death for a strict non-virtual funeral, even if it means that only a handful of people will be allowed to for the event. At least I will be guaranteed some semblance of exclusive solemnity and remembrance, however short-lasting it is in terms of its duration.
Very true.
Thank you, Dave. You, I don't know whether I could call them a rant.
It's more like a reality. It's making people aware that don't take things for granted. Even if the vaccine is down the corner, you could be afflicted with this disease on the last few days now. And if you fall ill, it is not how prevalent the disease is, but whether your immune system falls in that 5% group to put you in the high risk category.
Exactly. So it's a little bit, yours is as cheery as my poem in the first half.
Yes.
But, you know, all the talk about Christmas and, you know, in my heart, I just think, just keep yourselves to yourselves and just, you know, do it after.
It's a risk not worth taking.
When those people at risk are vaccinated, or even you.
It's a risk not worth taking, Simone, this year.
No, exactly.
Sorry.
Now.
Can I just say something?
Oh, yes, sorry, Phil. I thought it was Mark trying to speak and he wasn't moving. Sorry.
It's just that it makes me think of that scene in All Quiet on the Western Front, where the last person to die in the war, reaching up and trying to catch a butterfly or whatever it was in the story, and you know we've all got to try and avoid being like that, really.
Yeah, very difficult. Yvette, I'm assuming that you're done for the night. Yeah. Tony.
I've got two very short ones, if that's okay.
Okay.
One is neither of them are new. One I like, but I feel a bit, what's the word for it, overawed by what's gone before, but I'll do it anyway. Another one is, I hope, a bit funny. The first one is called The Clothes She Wore. A week ago, when early sun kissed the slumbering world awake, she wore a dress of lily white with belt of sapphire round her waist, matching the gemstone of her eyes. Radiant and precious in her youth, proclaiming a universal truth that beauty touches every heart, and nature always better heart. Last night when the moon was full, driving darkness from the land, banishing all lurking sense of fear, she wore a gown of ruby red. Bracelets of gold adorned her arms, a vision of so many charms that all who saw her cried her name, and none decried her well-earned fame. Today the wind is harsh and cold. Unpicked fruit rot on the tree. She wears a coat of mournful grey, bright colours nowhere to be seen. With ashen face and time-bleached hair, no heads turn to see her pass, scurrying alone on frosted glass, towards an unlit, lonely house, a timid, frightened little mouse. Tomorrow, when the snow lies thick upon the stony, solid ground, we, perhaps, a tiny few, will wear our coats of Bible black, and ponder on a life that's been too short, or perhaps too long, as voices join in gentle song. Who will read the eulogy to mourn the passing such as she? That's that one. And this is, I wasn't going to do this one, but then Anne's story I found extremely amusing. And I thought, well, my little book has got a poem about a mouse, so I thought I would do that one. It's called Size Matters. I've done it several times. A dingly-dangly elephant lusted after a tiny mouse and plotted a sexual encounter, the overweight, oversexed louse. He sent a love poem in Sanskrit and fine selections of cheese, trying to gain her affection, doing all that he could do to please. At first, she repulsed his advances, even when he plied her with mead, but later his charms worked their magic. At last, she began to take heed. Triumphantly crying Geronimo, he passionately leapt on the bed, which collapsed as a result of the impact, leaving his face flushed and bright red. But by far the worst disaster, so some may shout, thank God for that, but the poor mouse took such a pounding, she ended up splattered and flat. The moral of this sad misadventure is always to be thoughtful and wise. And despite what people may tell you, what really does matter is size.
Thank you, Tony.
I can load a tone in any meeting.
Oh, brilliant. Anne, did you have another one to read?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to finish off with one that I've rewritten this afternoon. Does anybody else want to read anything before I bring the night to a close? Okay, Mark's waving. I don't. No. Okay. So this was one that came from a virtual creative writing afternoon a few months ago, and it was quite good the way that she did this. It was to go towards the national writing competition, I think, and it made you sort of think a little bit outside the box and get some writing on paper. I have written this, but then I've tweaked it this afternoon to sort of reflect our latest lockdown, if you like. And the backdrop that we've got behind us is from Appleton Le Moors. So this is when Chris and I visited a couple of years ago. So the initial bit of the writing afternoon was to write about an experience that we'd enjoyed, then to think about that place in lockdown, and then to think about going back to that place. And I did a couple of different ones. One of them was actually with Pippa. But this afternoon I've rewritten this one. Appleton Le Moors. A quaint Yorkshire village with sheep roaming free. Our cottage overlooking fields stretching for miles. The two of us and a reluctant teenager in tow. A few days away from the stressful routine, enjoying February's cold, crisp, short days. Snowdrops emerging from winter, adorning the verges. Rugged up with coat, scarf, hat and gloves. Perfect weather for exploring those hills.
Ah,
Then returning to our cosy cottage to unwind, curled up with a cup of Yorkshire tea and a scone, watching the weak winter sun setting. And what would it be like today? We're now free to travel the world. The teenager has flown the nest, but COVID-19 has stolen our time. The country is on lockdown too. The cottage is lying empty, no one admiring the beautiful view. The village sleepy and peaceful, no doubt. The sheep already carrying their lambs. A beautiful day for walking, wrapped up warm. The brown crisp leaves crunching under our feet. The smell of open fires tainting the chilly air. And returning to the cottage, curled up with a mug of hot chocolate, watching the sun setting. Maybe next year we can return, just the two of us, walking in the hills when spring is bursting at the seams, daffodils carpeting the verges, watching the newborn lambs jumping about, and returning to the cottage, curled up with a cup of Yorkshire tea and a scone, watching the spring sun setting.
Oh,
Something to look forward to. So I think that concludes the evening. Thank you very much for joining the Chapel Art Spoken Zoom.
Well, thank you for organising, Simone.
yeah.
thank you, yeah.
It seems to have gone quite well.
Oh, yes.
It seems to have all worked with the technical side of things.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I'm not just sure, the next one would be January, which is probably a little bit too soon to be going back to REMS in person. So hopefully we'll have our Zoom account set up and possibly do it on a virtual basis again, like we've done tonight.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, but who knows?
One knows.
Thank you, Simone.
So
Enjoy the hills, everyone. Enjoy going for
always.
your walks.
Always, yes.
got one lined up tomorrow with Pippa.
Great, yes.
Good. Yeah, it's going to be sunny tomorrow.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed.
Good.
I'm going out sketching tomorrow with a friend.
Right. Well, I think I shall probably just, I shall go up to the top of Glossop Low, I think. Look at the landscape. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much and stay safe, everybody.
And you, Simone, lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Okay.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.